De mare.
Wow, that was exciting music. Like dancing. Hello, my sisters. How are you? I'm so glad to be in your company today for this exciting talk that we're going to put on. Jayne, Dr. Jayne, Cubbage, and Minister Jazz. How are you, ladies?
Wonderful.
Doing amazing.
Ready to get the party started?
Indeed.
I'm just so excited because I work solo most of the time, and so I feel like I have coworkers today, and especially in the media space and media literacy space. It gets smaller and smaller with people to have actual coworkers with.
Yeah.
So this is really exciting for me.
Yes.
So I won't stall the show any longer. I'll get started if you all don't mind with our talk. And before I get into my slideshow presentation, I have a little video that I hope will set up the scene for talking about mental models and the rest of the conversation that you all will share with us today.
Okay.
All right?
Yeah.
Okay. Here we go. Can you hear?
Always use the word.
We're not seeing it.
Oh, no?
Nope.
Okay, hold on a second. Can you hear?
We can hear it, but we're not seeing it. The screen is not shared.
Okay, let me see. Let me go back.
All right.
Let's see. Okay. Let's see if this is going to work better. Now?
We can see.
You can see?
Yes.
Okay, great.
How not to write about Africa by Binyavanga Wainaina. Always use the word Africa or darkness or safari in your title. Note that people means Africans who are not black. That people means black Africans. Never have a picture of a well-adjusted African on the cover of the book or in it, unless that African has won the Nobel Prize. An AK-47, prominent ribs, naked breast. Use these. Throughout the book, the doctor's subtle voice and conspiracy with the leader is silent. It's with so much tone. Africa is to be pitied, to be pitied, to be pitied, worshipped, or dominated. Whichever angle you take, be sure to leave a strong impression that without your intervention in your important book, Africa is doomed. Make sure you show how Africans have music in their souls and eat things no other humans eat. Monkey brain is an African's cuisine of choice. Establish early on that your liberalism is impeccable. Africa is the only continent you can love because you care. Your African characters may include naked warriors, royal servants, diviners, and seers. The modern African is a fat man who steals and works in the visa office, refusing to give work permits to qualified Westerners who care about Africa. Or he is an Oxford-educated intellectual turned serial-killing politician in a Seville row suit. You must always include the starving African who wanders the refugee camp, merely naked, who waits for the benevolence of the West. She can have no past, no history, Such diversity should go into dramatic moment. Your hero is you, if you're a catch, or a beautiful, tragic, a celebrity, aristocrat, renowned cares for animals. If fiction, describe in detail mutilated genitals and dead bodies. Remember, any work you submit in which people look filthy and miserable will be referred to as the real African. Animals, on the other hand, must be treated as well-rounded, complex characters. They speak of unwell, kissing the names proudly, and have names, ambitions, and desires. Never, ever say anything negative about an elephant or a gorilla. Readers will be put off if you don't mention the light in Africa. The African sunset is a must. You also need a nightclub called Tropicana, where mercenaries, evil, rich, prostitutes, gorillas, and expats hang out. Always end your book with Nelson Mandela saying something about rainbows or renaissances, because you can.
Okay, so that was quite an interesting video, wasn't it? It's about 11, 12 years old. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. It's about 11, 12 years old, but it's really powerful because it reads like a laundry list of stereotypes and generalizations, and really speaks to what people think of Africans. And there's so many correlations and parallels to what they think of African Americans and Black Africans throughout the diaspora. So I thought that was a really good video to show, to lay the foundation for how stereotypes, generalizations, and mental models happen, because media is so powerful in influencing how we develop what we think about people, places, and things. So I'm going to share really quickly again my screen and go through an interactive PowerPoint. So I hope that those of you that are watching will participate. Can you see the PowerPoint?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. Well, first, I just want to give a little background about who I am. My name is Ava Montgomery. I'm the founder and principal consultant for Conscious Media Consulting. And we were established so that we can help change narratives. We believe that the dominant narrative is responsible for many social injustices, and conscious content today can correct some of those false narratives and misrepresentations. And so that's our purpose and mission. So what is mental model development? We're going to talk about perceptions, imaginations, and reality, and how they're formed. What is a mental model? We probably all said, no wonder, of course, it figures a time or two in our lives when assessing someone's behavior or motivations. But mental model is a psychological representation of real, hypothetical, or imaginary situations. And they are often a way that we make sense of or explain or things or indicate an expectations. And that's why we get that, of course, it figures, well, you know, those kinds of things that occur. Media offerings such as images, imagination and imaging, text, talk, and symbolisms can influence how we develop mental models. Our lived experiences, information that is told to us from family, from friends, and other external influences, whether the information is accurate or not, can also influence how a mental model is developed. So we have to be really conscious about the information that we take in and understand why this information is being presented to us, how it's being presented to us, and really be discerning as to the accuracy of it and the intention for it. So I want you to look at this image and tell me what you see. And Jazz and Jayne, if you see any comments in the comment box, let me know if people are indicating if they see anything. And we're not going to stay too long on these images, but If you see something offhand, go ahead and put it in the comments box. All right, here's another image. And what do you see in this image? And this image, what do you see? You might see a landscape, a tree, some water. Anything else? And then in this last image, what do you see? You see some brush, some rocks, trees. Anything else? Okay. So in this Think Blots example, excuse me, some images were provided. I'm sorry, my fellow coworkers. Let me grab a little bit of tea. So in this Think Blots image, it was provided in a context where there were a lot of different things that, depending upon your imagination, you might have seen these images. You might have seen. Hello?
Wait.
Yeah.
Breathe for a second. Go ahead and take it in because your voice is still a little shaky. So
Hold on.
keep walking. Yeah. And then, like we're
We're among friends.
I want to make sure I keep to my time.
That's okay.
I am
we
so
are
not to go
rushing
over.
you. This
So
is
okay. Is that better? Is it better?
Yes.
Okay. All
Yes.
right. So you may see a sun. You may have seen a sun, a clown's face, a baseball, a spaceship, or a protractor. You may not have seen any of those things, and that's okay. And you might have seen other things that aren't listed here, and that's okay too. Based on your creativity, you might just see something that nobody else would see, and that's fine. So in this image, and any Game of Thrones fans may know this image as the famous tree. And this image was designed to give you the perception of a face, right? Okay. And our next image, you might have seen the landscape quite easily, and maybe that's all that you saw. This particular image relies on the imagination. I actually was in a movie theater many years ago, watching a movie, and this was one of those was a scene in the movie, and I leaned over to my friend and I said, "That looks like a face in the tree." And she's like, "Where?" So I pointed out to her, and she was like, "Oh my God!" So, but that was just my creativity, my imagination that saw this face in a tree. It's not actually a face in a tree. It's just the way the shadows and the sun hit and the bark grew. But to me, being an imaginative, creative person, I saw a face. So in this fourth image, you might have seen another face in the tree, and that's this little deer peeking out between the tree branches or trunks. Anybody see any of those? Okay. If you spotted the deer right away, it might be because if you spotted the other faces in the tree, you started to recognize that there's a pattern. So in the first picture of a tree with a face in it, and then the second picture of a tree with a face in it, if you recognize them, and again, you don't necessarily have to recognize them consciously, but if you did, you might have discovered that there was a pattern and a theme through these pictures, and that was trees and faces in the trees. And that's how media works. Very rarely is it an isolated image. Most of the time, images amount to something. They create patterns and then create themes. And we know that over 400 years of dominant narratives, false narratives, and misrepresentations, that images and narratives were created to create these models or stereotypes of people, very subtly sometimes, and of course very overtly at other times. And we know that media has played a huge part in that role. National Geographic not too long ago came out with an apology. They recognized that they were very influential in how they spoke about cultures of color. And they wanted to acknowledge that and make amends for their past mistakes, because they understood that the way they represented cultures and the narratives that they provided really made mental models in people's minds. And those mental models then are people behave in certain ways according to those mental models that they've developed, sometimes violently, sometimes just negatively through words, hiring practices, things like that. But they developed beliefs and ideologies based on media influences. And Variety, again, also talked about their responsibility in the entertainment industry for depicting people in certain ways, particularly Black Americans and people of color as criminals, and the criminal justice system itself. And so they too, and if you can look this up online, you can download, I believe, this special edition that they did where they have a lot of different celebrities talking about the role of media on criminalizing the representations and narratives of Black people. So this was just a very, very brief introduction to how mental models are developed, and hopefully we'll be able to talk about that throughout this presentation. But I want to let you know that if you go to our website and sign up to become a member, you can access the full presentation on how mental models are developed, as well as how symbols and symbolism appear in media as well. Okay, and I'm back, ladies. Any questions? It looks like there's I couldn't see that, Dima. Hopefully you all were able to see the images. Looks like they were a little slow to stream. But if you couldn't see the images, again, I invite you to go to our website. You can become a member. It's free, and you can access the full presentation of mental models. It's only 18 minutes or so, as well as one on symbolism, because those are two very important things to understand about media and representations.
All right. So I was just preparing. I didn't know that was the last sentence that you were going to make. So I was going to like take a little break there.
That's
So that I could, sure. I could sustain my voice during this time. I want to say thank you so much to everyone again for tuning in and taking the time to have yourself be educated, entertained, inspired, motivated to create and understand what it is that truly manipulates us, motivates us, and can sometimes make us mad. Okay. Yesterday was a hell of a day. And the day previous to that. And so in this moment, I just want to say her name and speak power to those that are grieving with, and the collective community around Breonna Taylor and the injustices. And so I just cannot have this moment go past without acknowledging the reason why this is so important, and the importance of media and how it shows up even in this moment about what we do. And you guys see my my makeup, which it's how I prepare. My sister and I, you'll see more about us in the slide. So first of all, my name is Minister Jazz. Some of you guys may have already heard my voice before in something that we did previous, but if you guys don't know me now, what keeps me up at night? Well, I'll say what kept me up last night was making sure that I'm doing due diligence in regards to the stories that I'm telling. I'm currently working on a movie script, and so I'm doing a lot of extensive research because I feel like this is my part in the way that I can contribute. So I'm going to go ahead and get my slideshow up and popping, and I'm hoping that I'm hoping that I do this right. Because just a second ago when I went to present it, I couldn't see anymore. So you guys help me out, okay? All right, so I'm going to press share screen, and I'm gonna go share screen here. I'm gonna go to Chrome tab. I'm gonna go. I'm gonna cancel and I'm gonna start all over. Make sure I get this right.
Take your time.
Mhm.
You know, I have a more effective way to. I think I have a more effective way to make this happen, and I'll do it that way instead. But yeah, so I mean, how I want to just while we're here and having conversations, how were you affected by the news in particular around Breonna Taylor, and do you think or believe that the coverage has been fair, even, and just?
Ball of wax. Well, as soon as I saw the news come across my screen, I did an Instagram post. I'm speaking of the news coverage when the lack of indictment came down. I saw it come through on one of the entertainment publications that I subscribe to, that there would be no indictments for her murder, and I immediately just posted on Instagram that it was an outrage. It was just outrageous. And all I could think of was, this is just outrageous. I mean, along with tears, but it's just the sense that people have such a lack of humanity towards their fellow man and woman. Oh, okay, I see what you're saying, Dima.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like how it really made me think, what kind of person, what kind of upbringing, what kind of ancestral legacy were you left that you cannot feel humanity towards people, and not just for Brianna, for everyone who has gone past. Why is it that you have such a lack of humanity? And we need to be discussing that more, I think.
Yes.
What is it about people who are so cold-hearted and vicious and indifferent? What is it about them?
That part, the indifference, like, as if you don't matter. I mean, literally the indifference, and so what keeps me up is making sure that I am checking in with myself, the places, and being honest with myself, the places that I'm being indifferent to others, right? Because I truly believe that it starts with me. Jayne, did you want to speak to how you felt about the coverage before I start my presentation?
Sure. Thank you, Minister. Yeah, I agree. I concur that when we see these repeated injustices, a colleague and I were speaking today, and she just put it very succinctly, and I echo her sentiments. And she just said, my feelings are hurt. And this is one of the things that I try to teach, which is for people to understand the structural processes and procedures that this happens and the reasons that it happens and that it keeps happening. And then for us to all be able to get to a place where we can check in emotionally so that we're not caught up in the wave of these negative emotions. Because for one thing, what has happened has happened, yet going forward, we have certain work that we need to do. And if we're coming from a place of extreme emotionality, then we won't necessarily be effective in what we need to do. So just kind of having everybody think holistically about the structure, the space that we find ourselves in, and the constructs that are associated with that structure that allows for this to happen. And so just kind of thinking about everything and putting it all on the scale and weighing everything and critically thinking about everything, like, why is this happening? Who keeps doing it? Who's ordering this? Who's setting up the payments to the family? And then what's the grand jury looking like that they can just kind of get away with it, with laws and structures are in place to allow these things? And then how do we go about dismantling all of that?
Yeah.
So
I think that one of the parts that gives me pause personally, and a lot of the people that I am in community with pause, is the how. Like that next step of I call it political phobia, right? Like really being afraid of politics and what that is, understanding that all of the things that you just mentioned, the systemic issues that we're addressing, are politics. They're in place because of that particular game, and understanding that. But because so many people are afraid and designed that way to be afraid and miseducated in regards to politics, they avoid it. And then they feel super frustrated because they don't have the how to move forward in this. Understanding the constitutional rights and the things that we can do moving forward. So let me go ahead and start my slideshow. And I just want to thank you guys so much for engaging with me in that conversation. Very, very cathartic and healing in the moment as I continue to just push through. You know how many times I was like, I can't do this. I was like, just kidding.
Right.
But I guess I can. I got my citrulline. I can do this. Okay, let's go.
But that is stunning, and it is a testament to the power of Black women and Black people in general that we can keep moving on to find it.
Let's go here. I'm gonna do this one more time. I'm gonna share this screen.
Mm-hmm.
It was a application window, or no, it was a tab, and the tab is the presentation. Yes. And share. So can you guys see this? Because now I can no longer see you. Yes?
Yes, starting to load. Yes, we can now see it.
Presentation, awesome. So this presentation is called Missing in Media, and it's the lack of media coverage for missing Black bodies. Last year alone, 205,802 missing Black people. And that right there is the same statistic, very close to the amount of deaths that we're having with the coronavirus.
Mm-hmm.
Yet we hear about COVID-19 every single day. Not many times are we aware of the number of Black bodies that are missing. It is disproportionate. You can see here that with Black people in America, the population is approximately 17% of the population. Yet, look at where it is in regards to the amount of people that are missing. So you can definitely see that it's just disproportionate. Like, it makes no sense that this is what's happening, yet we're not hearing about it in a way where we're doing things actively enough to quell the behaviors. So that's what happens when we don't hear about things in the news. We tend to not do anything about it. We tend to not move when we don't hear it in the news. And the media knows that. The people that fund the media, they know that. When we look at the numbers based on age, the predominant group that it's happening to is under 17 years old. The reason why this statistic stuck out for me so much and it really touched my soul is that I was kidnapped when I was 17 years old. When I was 17 years old, I was a freshman in college. My birthday is in November, so I graduated that year before, and I was off to college in that August. By myself and in a big old city, I decided that I was going to become a stripper. I wanted to dance, wanted to be in the mix, and I wanted to know. So clearly I was out there, I was underage, but no one was carding me. And one night I was abducted. I'm here to tell you about the story so you know that everything turned out okay. However, at that time, I didn't tell anybody about what happened. And so I sympathize a ton with the people, because I wonder who would have known whatever happened to me if I wasn't able to escape. I didn't tell anybody because I was embarrassed about what I was doing. I was embarrassed about, I didn't want to let my family know. I wasn't supposed to be there. And a lot of times, these are the things that are happening, and people aren't speaking up. Even when they're found, they don't speak out about it because of the embarrassment around these things. So I really felt like this is an important statistic, because some people are raped and they don't want their stories to be known, and they don't want to be known as that victim. And so it becomes a very stigmatized thing, because our system is set up where it's your fault. You were doing this, or you were doing that. We seem to lack a collective responsibility for community, in my opinion. There is an enormous lack of media coverage concerning missing Black children, and here are a few reasons why. law enforcement. So it really begins with the first layer of the first point of contact. The first point of contact would be someone calling law enforcement, which we already know there's a large mistrust for within the Black communities for law enforcement due to the things that we see and experience on a daily basis. But once somebody does make the call, it doesn't usually get further than that. Because the law enforcement, they will deem if it's a Black body, they'll probably deem that person to be a runaway, or they will declare that the case has some sort of criminal involvement. So it'll be treated as a crime as opposed to a missing persons. And it has it'll be in a different department and different kinds of detectives that won't really know what they're looking for. They're looking for start looking for a criminal. And just the desensitization of what happens to missing Black bodies. There's just a lack of care and indifference. And so, why the urgency? Why should we put out an Amber Alert? I'm just going to finish drinking my coffee. But if when somebody goes missing, every second counts. So it's really important. Now, the reason why law enforcement is here is because it's with law enforcement that the media and the news find their coverage. And so depending on how law enforcement files their reports, how they speak about it, what their biases are, all of these things. And if there isn't family, like the point one where people are embarrassed to speak about this, my sister was on drugs and she's missing, or, like whatever the case may be, then here you go. The news isn't going to know about it, and because it's not an attractive story, they're not going to cover it. There is a large lack of diversity in newsrooms. People tend to tell the stories that they believe are important. So if you are not in the newsroom, if you are not gathering data, if you are not at the forefront of what's happening in your community, the likelihood of your story being told it's slim to none. It has been said over and over and over again that Breonna Taylor's story was captivated the news because of what's already happening with George Floyd. And even though it happened right before that, it was just like the uproar of the sensation of the moment. The likelihood, if that wasn't happening, then it would not have been reported on the news. We would not be seeing billboards from Oprah of Breonna Taylor, because the stories like Breonna Taylor is happening a lot in America. And so it's really important. People tend to tell the stories that they believe are important. How many of you guys are aware or remember the movie Silence of the Lambs? This woman right here was the actor that was hired to portray the victim in the movie Silence of the Lambs. The movie was a screenplay that was created from a book that was a best-selling book. And the author admitted that he based his story on this guy, Gary Heidnik. Gary Heidnik was an American murderer who kidnapped, tortured, and raped 6 women, killing 2 of them while holding them prisoner in the pit of his basement in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. So why is this important? This movie, again, was a major blockbuster with high name art actresses such as Jodie Foster and Anthony Hopkins. It's one of my favorite movies, actually. I was like 11 years old watching this movie, dissecting it every day. Somebody should have knew that I was a weirdo then. But why this hit me so hard when I learned that this author was really inspired by Gary Heidnik is because his victims really looked like this. These are his victims. I get so emotional when I think about it, because he used Black women, he used mentally different Black women, and women that were drug addicted. And the things that were said right here, they were murdered, kidnapped, raped. So for this space to be the one that was used to tell this story, there's a huge problem. This story, this movie was put out in, I believe, the year 1991. So years and years and years ago, this happened, and so many people still don't know these spaces or their names. I use this picture. This is my sister, same mother, same father. And we, of course, we grew up together, very tight. And my sister is also a media maker. We, from very young, decided to be change makers through play and understanding the power of play and understanding the power of media and how to integrate media in that. And that's how I'm even here. Ava met me from one of my presentations that I did a little while ago, where we set up some play through media. The reason why I bring this up is because very recently we did this. The image that you see, I don't know if it's on your left or your right. So I can't even tell you, is an image of two Jamaican women. I have no information about these women except for the fact that this picture was taken in Jamaica. But they're two Caribbean women of African descent, and they look just together, strong and powerful. And in this moment, my sister and I wanted to show that that unity, that connection. My sister kept asking me, Jazzy, do you ever see Black women with weapons or in the on TV or in the news? Do you ever, what Black woman do you show protecting herself? Which Black woman is the star of something where she is the badass person taking down the robots or the aliens or whatever it is? Like all of these images that we see constantly where, except for our latest and greatest, Black Panther. And I really believe that that's why that movie was so popular. It's because it was one of the first times that we were able to see Black women protecting themselves and being strong and being badasses. And we want people to know that we can, and it is important. And the symbol of the machetes is very important because they're not just tools; they're gardening tools. So they're not necessarily weapons; they are actual tools of cultivation. They're tools that support you in clearing the land. And there's a lot of clearing of the land that needs to happen, in my opinion. There's a lot of weeds that are in our minds and our thoughts and in our way of being able to be powerful in this world. And so the tattoo that you see on my forearm is an Andrika African symbol. And it stands for when I give to you, you give to me, and we create together with community. It's a symbol of interconnection. And so we thought that was really important for it to show. The t-shirts that we're wearing represent my sister's bookstore that is based in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And it's called Harriet's Bookshop. Harriet is named after the great Harriet Tubman. And if you look at the image, the logo, there is a rifle that goes through the name Harriet. Sometimes people can't tell that that's what it is, but it's there in plain sight. And the reason why is because a lot of the story that has been kept out of the news, out of the media, out of our education, even when the most recent movie came out, it was given maybe 1 minute of time and glory, that Harriet was actually was a general, you know, and she was a spy, and she did carry a rifle, and she went almost nowhere without her weapon. So it's very important to, like, the way that guns and weaponry and all of these things are portrayed in the media. It almost makes it like, to see a Black body with a weapon is like, oh my God, it's the worst thing in the world. Don't do that. Don't ever do that. You can't do that. But there's a reason behind that. So we're looking to change that messaging. That's why it's important to tell your own stories. The time is now. We can't wait anymore. And it's really easy. This is the best time ever to do it because you have so many tools. You have social media. You can write a book. If it's not in a book that you read, you write it down yourself. You can make a song about it. There's once upon a time, music was a powerful medium for change. Nina Simone sung her butt off. And there's so much change with her voice, and Mahalia Jackson, and so many others. And so I just want to remind us that is also a medium. Podcasting is very important right now because if you have a microphone, if you have a smartphone, even you can start your own podcast, and that's amazing. like that's unheard of in this day and time. Just a few years ago, even it wasn't possible for people to be able to have their voices amplified in this way, their actual voices, right? Like we had blogging for the last maybe 15 years, and then social media, but podcasts have the power of the voice is tremendous. I am telling people to get into journalism. Understand what it is to craft a story, understand what it is to be investigative about what's happening in your communities, and know that those stories are important to be told. And through movies and TV, that's such an important medium. Like I said, I spoke about Silence of the Lambs. That particular movie inspired millions and millions and millions of people to look at serial killers and in the epidemic that was happening, that's always happening actually around, missing people, except for because the way and the who told the story, the faces and the colors were wrong. So this is the end of my presentation right now, unless we have any questions, but the name of my organization is much different. In Ubuntu, it says I am because you are, and we are much different. And what it means for me to be much different is that all of us together, though we're different, we have so much to contribute. So I'm gonna see if I can stop my screen share here. Stop screen share, and I'm back. There we go. Like now, I'm sure y'all can see me the whole time, but now I can see me. And I say thank you. Thank you for allowing me to go through that presentation. And if you have any questions or did any questions come up,
So I didn't see any questions that came up, but that was a wonderful presentation because I think that we're going to see a lot of weaving in our topics, although they're very different. We're going to see how media is responsible for creating mental models and how people behave based on those models. Like you said, those women were Black, but that's not a story that people want to hear. They want to believe that it's a white damsel in distress all the time. And then Black women are erased from being in distress. Yep. We're in distress, so we're so strong we can handle it. And right. So I think that's why it's so important that we understand perception, reality, and imagination, and how media is crafted to influence how we see things. Yep. I'm really excited for Jayne's presentation too, but that was my little bit. I think that was great. I think that was such a good example of how we are erased because we don't fit the model of being, somebody who might need help or might be kidnapped or might be a victim of something, a crime. What did you think, Jayne?
I mean, Minister Jazz, my hat's off to you. It's a wonderful, 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 just very, very excellent and just honest about the fact that, we don't get our fair shake in media. And, part of that process is our inability to deconstruct media messages, which I'll talk more about in my presentation. But my presentation also dovetails off of each of yours, Ava, as well as Minister Jazz, because Black women are just constantly vilified in the media, and we don't get the honor of being any proper victim. We don't get empathy from society, and we are considered as strong all the time. While we do have strength, we do need support from our loved ones and from our community and from society and the world. And we're still waiting for that today. As bad as we all are, as great and how much, no matter how much magic we put out there, we are still waiting for that love to come back to us. And that love will inhibit other people, will actually make other people or inspire them to feel our pain and to understand exactly where we're coming from. We are the mother of civilization. Yeah. So where is that honor? We're still waiting today.
Yeah. And Brianna is an example of that as well.
Absolutely.
You know, all of the things that we go through, and she is a perfect example of how that can all be erased and it just doesn't matter.
Yeah. We're still waiting for justice.
Doesn't
Absolutely.
matter. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you guys so much.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to mute my audio so your presentation.
Yes, let me do that.
Understood. So good evening, everyone, wherever you are around the world. Thank you so much for joining us for this wonderful conversation about media and media literacy and images of the Black woman, so-called Black or African-American woman in the media. I am Dr. Jayne Cubbage, and I guess to answer the question about what keeps me up at night, I want to be honest and say that I take my sleep very seriously, and I don't have sleepless nights just because that's just not a good thing for me. What I do concern myself with, what I do lift up constantly in prayer is justice for so-called Black and or so-called African or classified African-American women in this country. And then also another thing is media literacy for melanated audiences. That's one thing that also kind of concerns me to the point where I want to spend much of my life work making sure and sort of ensuring that all of us have enough media literacy to be able to process the media in our lives. We live in a mediated society. The media is ubiquitous and around us at all times. And there's no way we can actually function in this society without understanding the quote unquote machinations of how the media works. And so part of my presentation will kind of talk about that and give you tips and takeaways to become more media literate, but that's an ongoing conversation. I certainly don't consider myself, though I am a scholar and a published author about media literacy, I don't consider myself at the pinnacle of media because media is always changing and evolving. New technology is coming with us all the time. So media literacy is an ongoing, lifelong process. I'd love to see more melanated young audiences. That's children, toddlers, children, because people are giving cell phones to their young children. So as soon as you're able to look and see something, there's a media message in your face. And so we've got to be able to go back and teach media literacy, even at the earliest stages, all the way up to our senior years. So just something to think about that. When thinking about what the topics are going to be presented to today. And special shout out to all the people in the chat, because we got quite a few people who have joined us. And so I appreciate your joining and for your comments. So I'm going to share my screen and I'm going to start my presentation. Okay, can everyone see my screen? Yes? Give me a nod. All right, perfect. Okay, so the title of my presentation, and I'll do my best to make sure that I'm out on time, is Enhancing Diaspora Alliances via Increased Media Literacy. And by way of outline, I'd like to sort of give an overview of what I'm going to talk about in this brief, let's hope, presentation. First, the necessity of media literacy and how increased media literacy can enhance diasporian connections and collaborations, steps to increase media literacy in the diaspora. And well, I won't talk about organizations and outreach practices, but I will talk about how we can get more media literacy in our lives. So by way of introduction, as seen in much of mainstream media today, when we think about the continent of Africa and the diaspora, most of the content that we see on media, and this dovetails off of Minister Jazz and Ava's presentation as well, the media messages that we see they are frayed and misconstrued in many cases. I don't know if you can make this graphic out. I tried to kind of enlarge it, but it just basically shows that much of what we see in the media is sort of focused on Western and Northern countries, as opposed to the global South and West, where, I'm sorry, the South and East, whereby nations of Africa and possibly South America, where there's more poverty and less affluence, if you will, they're not able to get the kind of media coverage that the North and Western institutions countries are able to have. Who controls the narrative in this case? And that's a question you want to think about if you're a media literacy scholar, as well as a media consumer. So our lives and our fortunes, they're basically being played out in mainstream media without our narratives being able to be infused. And so this is going on without our input. And as we know, media is a corporation. Most media, even though we have independent media outlets, what we have is a difficulty of getting those messages, those independent small messages out, because those platforms are still controlled by and large by corporate entities who come along and under the concept of oligopoly. They, in fact, gobble up small upstart companies, and then they incorporate them into their larger companies. So when we think about Africa, we hear about the people in the diaspora and in the continent itself, and it's always disaster, 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 more disasters, never anything about the good. And this is what news, according to The Guardian, this is what it looks like. You can see here the image of the United States in purple, where there's a large swell, which, I mean, obviously, geographic wise, the map of the United States doesn't look like this, but this is the media distortion, the bubble that's coming out of Africa. You can see the little sliver here in South America. You can see North Africa figured prominently, Europe, and parts of the Middle East. And then, of course, Africa, south of the Sahara, being basically squashed in this news bubble or cycle. So when your oppressor controls the narrative, we want to kind of give an example using the AIDS epidemic in Africa. Essentially, journalists basically normalized that AIDS in Africa was a problem and that it was a normal problem. And rather than rallying and using news coverage to actually change the situation, they sort of normalized it. And I think Minister Jazz used the word desensitized the world to the fact that, well, you know, people in AIDS, that's just people in Africa get AIDS. Well, that's just what happens. And if it was covered, it was negative, or the issue of AIDS in Africa was completely ignored by the Western media. And then you've got other instances about negative coverage in the Western media, such as the graphic coverage where we had people's bodies and dismembered people who had died during the blast of the Nairobi shopping mall covered graphically in the New York Times, where in other tragedies, people who are victimized or people who have, limbs missing after an explosion, that wouldn't be shown in the media, but yet they chose to show the same thing. An Al Jazeera journalist stated that it's not negative coverage of Africa that's the problem, but rather the lack of in-depth, nuanced reporting on the continent and beyond. So it's one thing to tell the truth. If bad things are happening, it is the responsibility of journalists to actually tell that story, but without context is really where we get the challenge. And in the process, while they're so busy focusing on stereotypical coverage, then of course they're overlooking the good, like Rwanda, according to WHO, the World Health Organization, is becoming a world model in universal health coverage, which we don't even have here in the United States. Also, Africa is considered to be in the next coming decades, even really as we're entering further into the 21st century, the new frontier of technology and digitization. So we know we have the coverage of Africa, but of course we have the people, the daughters, the sons and daughters of Africa in the African diaspora. I guess today there are about 140 million diasporians around the world, while the population of Africa stands currently at about 1.2 billion and counting. And these people are all over the world, and we stand with Africa. We stand with the continent. We cheer it on, and we want to see it rise because our hopes and dreams are also situated and very much fused with the rest of the continent as well. Of course, we know that those of us who are children and sons and daughters of the diaspora were scattered around the world through the transatlantic and the trans-Pacific slave trades. And essentially, these two events scattered and gave the rest of the world the benefit of all that Africa has to offer. And this conversation sort of talks about the ways in which we can sort of bring our collective energies, our collective resources back together so that we can each impact one another and then uplift one another in the process. After the traffic, of course, we know that so much happened with the slave trades and the reasons why we left and the reasons why we were enslaved. And then after we were sent away, the colonizers returned to Africa, divided up the nations, and basically redrew the maps, and then came back and under colonialism proceeded to help itself. This is Western colonizers to all the resources. So again, back to the media messages. There is so much damage to the image of Mother Africa. Again, as mentioned, the diaspora cheers for every African victory. We see the triumphs, the development, and the technology wave, and we see the welcoming embrace for those who have traveled back to the motherland when we return, and the welcome that we get from our places in the West. And our hearts cry out when you cry out as well. So in talking about it and situating media literacy and the images of Africa and the African diaspora, we must question ourselves and say, when we're consuming these messages, why are these messages created? Who benefits from the messages? How are natural resources, when we're talking about resources in any of the countries being used? What is the impact of neocolonialism? What about the influx of China into many nations in Africa? How are African leaders managing the current day challenges? And we want to think about, in the spirit of Pan-Africanism, one of the first and original people who pioneered Pan-Africanism, and that would be Marcus Garvey, though there were many others like W.E.B. Du Bois and others. So from the perspective of analyzing media messages, we want to ask ourselves these deconstruction questions. Whose message is this? When you see a message, when you're consuming it, again, we live in a highly mediated world. There is no time when you are not consuming a media message. You're probably consuming media messages when you dream. That is how ubiquitous the media is. Accordingly, who created or paid for this message? And I'm quoting from the work of the Media Literacy Project from 2012. Who created or paid for these messages and why? Who's the target audience? What are the clues, the words, images, and sounds? What tools of persuasion are being used for these messages? What is the age, ethnicity, class, profession, interest of the target audience? And what words, images, or sounds suggest this? In other words, how do you know? So essentially, media literacy involves critical thinking. So it's not just passive consumption of media messages, but you're actually actively engaging and consuming in real time rather than sort of just allowing your subconscious to take over and be influenced without your consent. More questions about deconstruction. What values are expressed? What positive messages are presented? Are there any positive messages? What negative messages are presented? What groups of people does this message empower? And what groups of people does the message disempower? How do these messages serve the media maker's interests? So when you're a media producer, you have an intention, you have a target audience, you have an aim, and typically you want your audience to take some sort of action, whether it's stated or not. Also, what part of the story is not being told? How and where could you get more information about the untold stories? Can you research online? How can we, for instance, find out about the Heidnik murders in the city of Philadelphia? How do we know and make that connection? And where could we get more information about that when we're looking at or consuming the film Silence of the Lambs? Also, consider the source. Who's producing what messages? Because typically we cannot operate in an objective perspective. We cannot operate without bias. If we know that, then we're anticipating and we are prepared to accept or at least understand the way in which bias is infused in a particular message. Again, the world is highly mediated. One thing I must add, media all forms of media is a conduit of racism and white supremacy, because the constructs under which we operate and consume media have been constructed by people who do not look like the largely Black or brown people of the world. And even though we have adapted these platforms to our own culture, in reality, we're functioning in a system that has not been established by people of our own culture. If you cannot discern how to process media messages, you will believe them when you consume them. And most of the time, our subconscious is operating and we are not aware of that process. Use African-owned media when possible and evaluate those sources carefully as well. So somebody might have an organization that says Africa this or that, but it may be owned by people who are not truly of African descent. So consider that. And finally, spread good news about the continent when you can. The continent, its people, and its sons and daughters of the diaspora. Now, I want to add a caveat. While we're talking about media literacy, it is not necessarily a fail-safe. Other efforts, individual efforts, such as increasing media ownership, increasing media skills in terms of production skills, are also necessary, as well as greater dialogue between people in the continent and people in the diaspora. Greater collaboration is also something that we want to consider. Continue building and growth towards greater unity, more cultural awareness, thinking about ways in which we can overthrow colonial rulers, oppressive regimes. We are also concerned with equity for the sexes. And equity is not equality. We know that males and females are not ever going to be equal, but equal consideration is equity. Equal attention to our needs is something that we want to consider. Respect and consideration for all humans in their current state, wherever they are on the continent, and for their lives. Respect for the cultural heritage and experiences of the entire African diaspora. Again, this is a nod to Pan-Africanism as a way to unite everyone in the diaspora and on the continent to bridge the cultural gap. Again, unity. We must have unity, as the song by the OJs once said. Seeking alternative and culturally based media that provide dynamic visions, provides a dynamic vision for Africa and all of her children. Media literacy can assist with the process. And we also understand that we cannot continue with the current barrage of negativity about the continent of Africa. These messages are passé and they're no longer acceptable. They were not acceptable in previous iterations, but now we are in a new time. It is a new day and we need new messages and we need new media sources, particularly for people who are of African descent and on the continent. We essentially need more uplifting messages that celebrate our greatness. And again, a nod to one of the fathers of Pan-Africanism, Marcus Garvey, as pictured here. And so I want to end my presentation with a quote from the song "Africa Must Wake Up" by Marley and Nas, and essentially talk about the fact that Africa must wake up, the sleeping sons of Jacob, for what tomorrow may bring. We are hoping that a better day will come. Yesterday, we were kings and queens. They asked, "Can you tell us, young ones, who are we today?" Oops. And here's some references. Select, and thank you.
Wow. Wow. So powerful.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you.
The first, I want to just double back and shout out, Marcus Garvey, so amazing. As a Afro-Caribbean, Afro-Latino, however it is, whatever, all of the mixed culture, as I was sharing with Ava, I've seen in America how much the influence for so many movements. When I think about Shirley Chisholm, and she was also from the Caribbean, and so it's a lot of the different ways that people were educated outside of America has really influenced the changes that we have in America and throughout, all throughout all the time. And so, I'm always really proud to see the times when we did come together and when we did share our heritage and
Yes,
messaging.
we really are one.
Right?
That African blood runs through all of us, and it's something. It's a thread. It's a universal thread. The beat of the drum, the way we move, the color of our skin, just the melanated thought. I mean, we are, and it's evident. I went to Brazil and I thought, wow, this is just a continuation of who we are. And so it's evident everywhere, the continent, the Caribbean, South America, wherever we find ourselves, it's evident that who we are. Absolutely.
Right. Absolutely.
I also talk about deep blood breath, right? And how that does, it's the thing that connects us and it permeates each of our beings. And so once we know that, we know that we are essentially one and from one source. Thank you so much for the reminder of that. Are there any questions from the audience, or was there anything that you wanted to share or amplify?
Let me see. I don't see any. I see a lot of good comments of affirmation that people are appreciating what we're talking about today and media literacy. And I just wanted to follow up, Jayne, with you specifically talking about media literacy because, as I said earlier, I think that content, the dominant narrative, false narratives and misrepresentations are responsible for a lot of the mental models that we see carried over today, generation after generation after generation. It's why people think that we don't feel pain, that our lives don't matter, that they can treat us any way they want to, they can say anything they want to about us. I mean, it's been learned over years and years and years and conditioned. Yes. And we have also sometimes internalized that conditioning as well. To allow ourselves to be treated or mistreated in certain ways. And so I think somebody in the comment brought up that media literacy, something to the effect of what I'm going to say now, but media literacy, once you really become good at it, and like you said, it's a life skill. You're continuously learning how to be media literate. There's always people coming up with different ways for coded language, and it used to be in traditional text literacy, but now it's in digital literacy, movies, visual literacy.
Yes.
We need to be able to discern those messages so that we don't internalize them, so that we maintain the hold on understanding our Black brilliance and our contributions to the world.
Yes.
Not allow the subconscious messaging to influence our young ones. So when we do have them sitting in front of a TV or a cell phone, that we're engaging them in what they're watching, what they're hearing, we're asking questions and able to help them process that information so that we understand that they're not taking in the wrong messages. That
Absolutely.
if they are taking in the wrong messages, that we can correct that at a very early stage and start to have them become media analysts at a very, very early age, because it's gonna, like I said, it's a life skill, and so it requires the younger that kids start analyzing messaging, the better. When they become adults, they won't see the manifestation of doing, things to their bodies to try to fit into some mold that they were never meant to fit into, those kinds of things. So no, I think that media literacy is a life skill, and it is a self-esteem container, a maintainer.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much, Ava. The self-esteem and being aware of how it's influenced is important. We have a question. How do we navigate that even citizen journalism is now being hijacked by mainstream media? And I'll start, and I'm sure that you guys have some input on this. There's two things that come to mind immediately. First, the I and I. So I'm again, I said what keeps me up at night. Jayne, I had to envy you for to be like, look, I'm on the floor. Like I ain't never been to sleep, but that's but I think about what it is that I'm putting out into the world. That is important. If I don't put something out that can be hijacked and turned and switched, it seems like people are, anything can, and yes, maybe so. But the responsibility comes out with me. So being able to be media literate enough to know how this message can be misconstrued or used and turned and twisted out when I was doing a lot of newspaper articles and in the media and on television, we go through media training. Like they teach us how to form our sentences, how to take pauses, how to create sound bites, so that like that, so we know what's going on. So one of the first things is thinking about that, but also Jayne alluded to this before, is being mindful of the mediums that we're using, who owns those mediums, and knowing that if we're using someone else's software, equipment, media, it's fair game, and so really being, again, creators of our own right. I want to get with some of these people in Africa that are doing the technology and digitizing and advancement. I want to like teach me. I want to be able to make my own systems. Like I think that that's really important, and that's why like even creating my own movies, like the movies that I want to watch. If they, like Toni Morrison said, if there's a book that you haven't read that has a story,
Yeah. Yes.
That's what I mean. But and so definitely that in regards to journalism is being mindful of the messages that we are putting out there, how to craft messages that take away enough of the fat that they can't be manipulated and misconstrued, and then being mindful of the platforms that we put them on.
Yes, indeed.
Go ahead, Jayne, and then I'm going to add to that.
Well, I was just going to add that, thank you, Ava. I was just going to say that we also need those alternative media outlets, because media literacy is one component of understanding, okay, this is what they're doing, but we also need to engage those current media content producers and let them know, because the media relationship is a triangulated relationship. You've got media producers, the audience, and then you've got the advertisers. And typically the audience is a silent member of that relationship, and they don't engage enough to let people know. Remember, media is a business. So if I go into any other establishment and I'm not satisfied with what I'm receiving, or not satisfied with the end product, well, there's a point of contact, and there's something that we need to sort of work out in regard to our relationship. And that doesn't happen because many media audience members are not aware of the power that they hold. And so that's also something. But again, and then if there's always got to be an or else. So when you're kind of in a contentious situation and people won't change and clean up their act, then you've got to be able to say, okay, change it or else. And right now we have very little in the bucket of or else. It's sort of like, oh, change it and I'm just not going to watch. So change it and I'm not going to be informed, because what else are you going to do? So that's one thing to consider that I wanted to add.
Yeah. And so I'm just going to add to that. When we talk about media, it's helpful if we know that media is a lot of moving parts. It's not just one thing. And so people can generalize, I hate the media, or the media did this, or the media is my friend, or the media is the enemy. Well, the media is content, it's platforms, it's people. And so when we know what those platforms are, we know what the content is, text, talk, image, symbolism, and then we know the people who are bringing us the media. They are the ones that are reading the scripts. They are the ones making movies or singing songs. When we know what all the moving parts are to media,
yes,
and we see that there's a problem, or we see problematic content, we're more likely to know who to address that content with. Is it an editor, the way something that was edited? Was it something that was written, the way it was produced, whether it was sponsored, whether, somebody promoted something that was foul? So when we understand all of the moving parts to media, we're better able to articulate to that person who's responsible for the problematic or even the great content.
Yes.
Great, fantastic job representing me or telling that story or whatever. So that's one thing that I want to say and then specifically when it comes to hijacking citizen journalism, you probably all have heard about branding. I mean, branding is like big. Whether you're in any industry, your brand, your brand, what your business does, your brand.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you're putting something out into the public sphere, make sure you have a watermark. Like we have the Africa Week watermark. Yeah. Or if I create something, I'm going to have my business logo on it, so that when it goes out, people know who owns that.
Yeah.
And if they try to hijack it, you have a way of saying, let's roll the tape to where this originated from.
Yeah.
And it really acts as a deterrent for people to try to steal content that is not theirs when there's proof that it belongs to somebody else and somebody is claiming their content.
Absolutely.
And what I would say, brand everything you put out there that you think is notable and worthy and you want credit for, and so that somebody might take credit for, it's brand it, put your name on it.
Yeah.
And don't give somebody that opportunity. Make it they may try still, but at least you're offering some kind of deterrent for that.
Yes, indeed. Yes.
Let's see. There's another question or a comment. It says, also we need our entertainers to be held accountable for their portrayal of us because they carry a huge influence worldwide. Absolutely. You want to take that? The media, the entertainers role. I have lots of thoughts on that, but I'll let somebody else go.
Well, I think also we have to remember that entertainers are paid employees. There's very seldom an independent entertainer. Most of them are under contract. Most of them are given roles, and the roles that they are given are they're created by a group of people, a committee of people. Then you've got a chain of command, an entire organizational chart that says, here's the flow and here's the role and here's how we envision this. I think rest his soul in peace and empower, but Chadwick Boseman talked about taking a role that he had to basically leave because he was on a soap opera, and then he said that the person that they wanted, in fact during his commencement address at Howard University a couple of years ago, he stated that he had to walk away from that role because he was actually fired because he actually stepped to the producers and said, why doesn't this person have a backstory, and why can't we have some more positive coverage coming out or emanating from this person's life, at least if he's come from a bedraggled space, that let's talk about his story and how he overcame. And the producers were like, oh, so you went to Howard, you come from a good home, and so, and they kind of dug around in his background and realized, oh, he's too proper to play this role the way we would like. He really won't get down with it, because they were so bent on representing a young Black male in a stereotypical fashion.
Right?
So, the only power he had in that role was to speak his mind. But again, they replaced him with no less other than Michael B. Jordan, who he co-starred with in Black Panther. And so the reality is that entertainers, they are aware, but then what's their mindset when they set forth and say, you know what, I'm just going to ignore the damage that this is going to do, and I just need to get my paper. I just need that role. So if I can just get 2 or more meaty roles, then I'll be able to go up and call my own shots. And so they are kind of they're not active actors in this process, and they don't control the process to the extent that we think they do. Just like the songs that we have coming out, emanating from the hip hop world today, though that's extremely challenging. It's my understanding that those artists are being told to promote a certain kind of music, and we know that's just not acceptable. Include Minister Jazz.
I'm like,
yes, of course.
Oh, is that in regard to
you to talk? What do you mean?
I'm here, right? I guess if wanting to address with the entertainers, I mean, I was silent because Jayne, you're saying my words that I would echo definitely in regards to the chain of command, if you will, and the hierarchy in regards to how we get to see what it is that we see. The entertainer actually is the last person on board, and the casting director even has the more power than that actual entertainer. And so, if we think of these roles as clothing, and how it looks different on every single body, but you had all of these things that led up to the making of the clothes. You had the clothing designer, etc. That's why I thought about being an actual writer of content. Even though I love directing, I love producing, and I am a performer, like I love acting. Being a writer gives me more power around the story that gets to be told, opposed to just fulfilling a role that someone else has designed. So that's why it's so important. And plus, I love old media. I love looking at papers from the time when I was born, newspapers from the 70s and the 80s, and really dissecting those stories and seeing how words have changed in the media over time. I'm going off on a tangent, but it was something that I just recently came across in regards to the word retarded.
Yeah.
And in the newspaper, in the 80s, it was nothing to use that term. And now, you say it and you're like, what? And so it gives me hope. That's why I bring it up. It gives me hope that things will, can, and shall change, and that it's because people were speaking up, and people from the mental health community were speaking up, and and people cared enough to make those changes. And so, like I said, I bring that example up so that we can see the power that we have when we do. It's hard to see it when you just look inside the bubble and just maybe like the last year, but over time, when you go back to how things were, the stories and the way they were told and who were telling them before versus now, you can see that there's a shift, and that gives me some encouragement.
Yes. Yes. Indeed.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, thank you so much, Dima.
Yeah.
Yes.
To close rank, that's
how can we raise awareness in a way that emphasizes our need to close ranks? So again, I like that you said dangling of carrots, Dima, because it goes back to values, and then again to the I. So understanding what is it that I'm willing to exchange, and I'm gonna say it like this, my soul for. Like how much can we buy me for? And it really is an individual question. People, we like to think about things in the terms of unity and in expansion, but it's down to those individuals making sure that whatever it is that they've experienced in their life, start dissecting that even. Because sometimes our cultural influences from our parents, grandparents, and so forth need to be eradicated. Even those need to be eradicated, and understand what my value system is now. So once upon a time, my grandfather might have said, do whatever it takes to make sure that you reckon $100,000 a year, and so do whatever it takes to me means whatever it takes. And if CNN shines a thing, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna do whatever it takes. But if my value system is planted and rooted in making sure that I'm amplifying the voices of people that need to be not only considered but celebrated, then the CNN can't say nothing. Just recently, Gucci came to us and asked, like we were just like, absolutely not, and we don't want anything to do with you. We didn't forget what you did last year. So, and being able to say that it's huge to other people. But when your value system is set, and that I do everything that I do today is for my posterity, it becomes easy notice. So getting into what it is that your value system is going to be so important in order to be able to tell, nah, we did it.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know what? And I would just add to that sometimes we can look at things as either or instead of and both. And so if you have an opportunity, like I would say no to Gucci all day long. I haven't forgotten either. And I don't feel like they really. Well, one of just a real side note on that is that we have to hold them accountable by maintaining our line. They'll apologize or say,
yeah,
and then we'll be like, okay, let me go buy your products now. No. Because
we're putting black women in the front of our, no, you're using me. No.
Right. Economic does work, right? And so the other thing I was going to say is if CNN or BBC or a lot of these mainstream organizations come calling, you can be your authentic self and bring your authentic message and use them to get it out to a wider audience, right? You don't have to change who you are to go on to their platform. And if they want you, they're going to want you for your authenticity. And if they don't, and they want you to try to change and become like a media plant to be put out there to sway people into their way of thinking, then say no. But generally, if they're going to come calling, it's because they've seen your message and how you've been carrying it, and they want to explore that further on their show. And you just tell them, you're not going to hijack me. You're not going to change my narrative to suit yours. If you want me on the show, this is what I'm going to say, or I won't be on there. I mean, there's just no point. being on some place where you can't be your authentic self.
Yeah.
The money or the fame, it's so short lived, but your soul and your conscience, it's going to be with you for as long as you are, forever on the earth or into the next life, right? And so you don't
pass down through your children now.
Yeah,
absolutely. And dovetailing off of what each of you said, really, we want to bring everybody along. It's not enough for just one or two of us to succeed. And if we thought about that when we engaged and stepped into these arenas, then we would have less of a battle at this point. So we've got so many people that came before us, whether or not they had the power or the ability to challenge these narratives or to incorporate everybody else or to think more about community. That didn't happen. So now, as we move forward, that's something that we all need to think about. How does this uplift and benefit the community? If it's taking us back, then maybe we want to rethink that and leave that cheddar on the table and then sort of think about, like, what else could I do? The one thing that this is going back to a point previously that we were all making, and that is popularity is a big thing in our community among the melanated populations. Like, we need to be seen as good as, that's from centuries of being degraded and stereotyped and told that we have no value. So when we get anywhere in the vicinity of what looks like value and affluence and influence, then we're so eager to take the reins, when in reality, we have an opportunity to sort of step back and evaluate really what's going on with the situation and then find values within ourselves, in our own community. We don't need the rest of the world to validate us, because they haven't. And it's my estimation that they won't, so that we create our own validation in these spaces, in our own spaces, and then sort of just kind of step away. And then they step to us when they need what we have under the circumstances that we set forth.
Yeah.
right, exactly.
Something that I've been talking again with people in my community is about freedom, and just the concept of freedom, and like the images that we see that represent freedom. Like, I was just like, what's our unified image of freedom? And people were like, and just the fact that it even started off with is a problem, right? The fact that we don't have like a clear, like, oh yes, we see that, we know it means freedom. If we can't communicate it, if we can't vocalize it, if we can't write it, if we can't draw it, we can't have it, so it's really hard. And so what I know and realize is one of the chains that needs to be broken is that chain of validation. Feel as though we only exist because someone else says so. So because I say so, identity needs to be at the forefront. That is the way that we can break free.
Absolutely.
We can't do that by not being tethered to media messaging.
Absolutely. That's so well stated. I mean, wonderfully. I mean, freedom is multidimensional, because we have freedom on one aspect. Freedom, we don't have economic freedom. We don't have, political freedom. We have no justice. We don't even have spiritual freedom. And really, we don't even have cultural freedom, because our culture is always subject to appropriation, because it's as if we can't even own our own creative force in some cases. And this is what happens when you are led captive into other lands and you don't control the process. And as much as we have gotten up and risen through the upper ranks and echelons of the political process, economic process, we're all over the place, but yet we have not been able to sort of really gain those reins of power. And again, I'm always for, we've been trying the same thing for 400 years. And so maybe we want to move across the plane and come up through another chute and another sphere and field, and try something different, because we can't take another year of more insanity. And that's kind of what this has been. I liken our situation here to a dysfunctional relationship in some cases. And so that's why we don't have freedom, because we're dealing with an entity that's not reasonable and really is no respecter of our concerns. And so that's, we have to have those tough conversations, because a lot of people aren't there yet.
Right, exactly. Right. Nobody can deny our Black brilliance. They're always trying to claim it, to take it, appropriate it.
Yes.
But they can't have it. There's an essence. There's an essence that we'll never. I mean, we're born with it, into it, and so.
Roy wrote to know that we're born into it.
Yes. So I.
Thank you, Amani, for your messages. Thank you.
I don't know how much longer we can stay, Dima. You may want to let us know if we need to wrap this up because we're enjoying ourselves. So
We could talk forever.
we could talk a long time about this, but I don't know that we actually can. If you have another session coming up, or however the back administration is working, so let us know, and we can wrap things up. Or
say this, can we just say that we're ready to close? Each one of us maybe give a closing statement, and if any other thing comes up in the chat, then we maybe can address it. But you can go ahead and.
Yeah, can I share my screen one more time, because I want to give a resource,
Yes.
A media literacy resource, and then I'll come back real quick. Okay.
Okay.
Let's see. Okay, so can you see my screen? Okay, you can see it now. So I just want to let you know that the Critical Media Literacy Conference of the Americas is coming up, and it's going to be online, and it's free. It's a media literacy resource that all of you can register, and participate in the sessions, which is, most media literacy conferences that I know of, there's a charge. I will be presenting at this one about decolonizing content, but not just for my presentation, just for your edification on the subject of media literacy. I just wanted to share this resource with you, and you can look it up on Google for Critical Media Literacy Conferences of the America, or you can go Americas, or you can go to my website, and there's information on how to register.
Okay.
Okay. So I just wanted to give that. And I also, in my closing thoughts, I wanted to thank Dima and Alexandra for putting this together, this Africa Week 2020. This is the second time they've done it this year, and it's fabulous. I'm so excited and proud that they let me be part of it, and that I have my coworkers with me today. It's been so awesome to be in discourse with you all.
Yes.
And it just, I didn't say what keeps me up at night, but I will say that I think a lot about media literacy, and how if our diaspora could gain more media literacy skills, especially in conscious ways, being able to compare messages from the past to what we see in content today. I would really love that, because I think it will bring us closer together as a community, and that individually our esteems will increase, and that our affinity for our community will increase when we are not getting negative messages about who we are and what our community is and what they're doing, and all these false narratives and misrepresentation. So that keeps, it doesn't keep me up at night, but it's my mission in life to really try to change narratives and help people understand narratives so that they can change them too. And I just want to wish everybody well. Stay in good health. We know that there's so many pandemics going on. So whether it's a health pandemic or a violence pandemic, I just want you all to be safe and in good stead. Wear your mask, and be good and kind and literate to each other and for each other.
Wonderful.
I am thinking on Harriet Tubman, as I often do, and I'm so inspired by her life and journey, and really, like not just because I saw the movie, like like
Got the receipts.
One of the things that she said when she came into Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, when she crossed over the Mason-Dixon line, she said she felt like a stranger in a strange land. And it was because she wanted so much to be free, but when she got there was no family. There was nothing that she knew. It just didn't feel like home. And she said her home was where everything was back in Maryland. And I can see how that can be such a struggle. How we want to achieve this sense of freedom, this sense of liberty, but all that we recognize, all that we know is wrapped inside of what it is that we're experiencing now and what we've been experiencing for the last 400 years and beyond. And so, I just implore everyone to think about Harriet Tubman, because what she did was she just kept going back. She kept going back and bringing more and bringing another and bringing another so that they can experience that sense of freedom. So each and every day that we speak and that we share our message, we bring another person over. So even though we might be strangers in a strange land now, we don't have to stay there, and we can make a new home in a new place. And I just implore everyone to do that. And I just want to say, I am because you are, and together we're much different. God bless.
Yes, Ubuntu, Ubuntu. It's a blessing and a pleasure to be here with all of you. Welcome, and it just enriches my heart so much to be able to have this kind of conversation, because it is so necessary. And I just want to, as parting words, say to everybody to remember that we have been beautifully blessed and endowed by the Creator, and that everything that we are experiencing has a reason and a purpose. And that if we have that sense of what our divine purpose and our divine order is to in this sphere, in this place, in this space that we find ourselves now, that we will have all the answers. And then most of all, we will have that peace, which is in short supply right now, but we will have that peace, as they say in scripture, that passes all understanding. That's what we need right now. We need more peace of mind, satisfaction, and just ease of spirit with all the chaos going around. Remember that it may fall to you, people may fall on your right and fall to your left, and that you may be going through fires and being overtaken by streams, but it won't affect you if you are in that right spiritual sphere. So that's just my encouragement for everyone. Of course, more media literacy, more critical thinking, and just being active and alive today. Don't allow these circumstances to deprive you of your daily life. We all still have a life to live, despite all the chaos and the mayhem that's going on all around us. So peace, continued blessings to everybody here tonight in this space.
Thank you. And remember to vote.
Thank you, Africa Rising. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, ladies. Thank you, audience. It's been fun. Thank you.
Yes. Wonderful.